Office women expected to clean male coworkers' dishes. One man gets angry when they speak out. I work in a male-dominated industry, and my large department only has 5 women working in it. Our custodians do not wash dishes. The office policy is everyone washes their own. Unfortunately, this results in an ongoing issue where about 1/2 the men in the office use dishes and leave them in our tiny sink. They stack up and smell bad, and everyone has to awkwardly use water around them when accessing the sink. Everyone is grossed out when this happens, but a pattern has emerged where the women of the office end up washing the dishes because they'll otherwise be left forever. We've even tried going on strike and privately agreeing not to wash any dishes, but after Tilda, a week of the kitchen smelling like a sewer, and everyone complaining but doing nothing, and being so used to women of the office doing it that they seem to be blaming us for the mess. One of us cracks and does it. We've all tried addressing it multiple times in multiple ways, but the men of the office imply we're being nags and refuse to engage. This is a situation the women are all deeply unhappy with. We have actual work to do, damn it. With that context, last week, I went in the kitchen and found a pile of tongs and bulky platters in the sink covered in food goo. I was annoyed and did what I needed to do around it. When I came back at the end of the day, the stuff was still there, and it was so cumbersome trying to use the sink that I just washed everything, low-key fuming the whole time. My co-worker Liz ran in, apologizing profusely, saying the dishes were hers. They were catering dishes from a meeting she'd been running, and she'd dropped them off, thinking she'd be able to come right back and take care of them. But then she'd gotten held up all day. I told her I had been frustrated when I thought one of the men of the office had left a mess again, but I didn't mind cleaning up after any of the women, since they'd built up plenty of cleaning karma over their time working here. After I said that, a co-worker, Tim, walked in, and I guess he heard me, because he confronted me the next day and said it was really sexist that I would say messes were okay when women left them, but not men, and he asked that I apologize for saying that. Tim generally does clean up after himself, but I tried to explain that the 5 women of the office don't just clean up after ourselves, but are constantly cleaning up other people's messes, and that's mainly what I was referring to. He got angry and said we choose to do that. No one puts that on us, which is only partially true, but you could say that's our fault for establishing the precedent. I've been feeling awful about how this whole thing went down, especially because Tim isn't one of the repeat offenders, though he's not my favorite person for other reasons, which is probably biasing me here. I asked a friend I don't work with his thoughts, and he said the whole thing sounds ridiculously dramatic and passive-aggressive, and I can see his point. To be perfectly honest, I think the industry I work in has a lot of gender problems and fosters an environment where very old-school ideas of women's work are generally accepted, consciously or unconsciously. For example, Liz's job description does not include meeting logistics, and there were more junior male colleagues on the team running the big meeting with her, but she was still the one who ended up responsible for arranging for the catering and dealing with the dishes. I think I have a lot of resentment bubbling over the gender politics of my office in general, and I don't really like Tim as a person, which is one reason why I don't really trust my objective reading of this particular situation, and wanted to get outside judgment. I don't know if this adds any relevance, and it's kind of buried in a different comment, but even though Tim does his own dishes, he has joined in on making fun of us and shutting us down in the past when we've tried to bring this up as an issue with "give it a rest" or "it's not that big a deal" style comments when we've publicly raised the problem, reminded people it's an every man for himself situation, or tried to come up with other solutions. Once when a female colleague added at the end of her "and just a reminder, please keep in mind the cleaning staff doesn't do dishes, and we all need to make sure to do our own," Tim literally yelled, "Boo!" at her. Update 1. I did go and talk with the other women in the department about how untenable the situation was and how we needed to take action. I showed them the Reddit post for us to discuss. Many of the things suggested, like keep all the dishes ourselves and issue them out like a lending library or throw away dirty communal dishes, we didn't have the authority to do, so we made a new plan. Starting that Monday the 4th, we stopped using our kitchen altogether and instead started going up a floor to another department's kitchen to get coffee, heat up our lunches, do our dishes, etc. The comments started that Thursday with a couple of male colleagues passive-aggressively mentioning that the kitchen was a mess. I just innocently responded, "Oh, is it?" I haven't been in there all week. The following week it got worse. I still hadn't gone in the kitchen, but I guess things rotted over the weekend because my male colleagues were complaining about the smell and were mentioning it semi-accusingly around me and the other women. We just shrugged it off and said we hadn't been using that kitchen, so we hadn't noticed the mess. The following week it got worse. I still hadn't gone in the kitchen, but I guess things rotted over the weekend because my male colleagues were complaining about the smell and were mentioning it semi-accusingly around me and the other women. We just shrugged it off and said we hadn't been using that kitchen, so we hadn't noticed the mess. By midweek, several of the guys had caught on that we were all going upstairs to use their kitchen and started berating us for being petty and trying to make a point. We claimed we were using the other kitchen exclusively in an effort to get our step count up, since our workplace is currently running a Fitbit-based insurance incentive program. For the record, that's not totally untrue, though obviously it's not our main motivation. Apparently, near the end of last week, our kitchen finally ran out of clean communal dishes, because the guys started coming upstairs to the kitchen we've been using and taking their dishes, then returning them dirty to that floor. Unfortunately for them, the CFO's executive assistant rules the roost on that floor, and apparently was pretty pissed off. So yesterday afternoon, a super scary serious all-staff email went out from the CFO basically reminding employees to be adults and do their own dishes. The way the company is set up, our CFO acts as the big boss, since our president CEO is more focused on strategic partnerships outside of the company, and isn't really in touch with the day-to-day of the staff, so an email from him shook the whole staff. I still haven't been in our floor's kitchen since this whole thing started, but one of my female colleagues told me that, as of this morning, it's clean again. End of old update. Okay, so obviously a lot has changed since I posted this. The whole office went full-time remote last March when the pandemic hit, so the dishes issue was moot just a few short months after my post, though our short-term victory was sweet. But working from home ended up exacerbating a lot of the sexism inherent to that company, women being taken off the good projects or not being invited to meetings relevant to their work, and things generally being more opaque when we weren't in the office together. Liz and I both left the company last year, and I ended up going to a different, but semi-related industry. I took a pay cut, but I'm much happier where I am. I feel respected and valued, and I'm given work that challenges me. Key takeaways? I'd love to live in a world where places like Dollar Old Company didn't exist, where sexism doesn't hold women back in the workplace, and where thriving at work doesn't require leaving a field, because the people are toxic, even if you genuinely love and are good at the work. But at the end of the day, life is too short to stay at a workplace that actively erodes your mental health. Sometimes problems are too systemic for one person to take on, and it's okay to opt out of places like that. Ultimately, the dishes were one small symptom of a much bigger problem, and I think perhaps dishes were just the straw to my camel, or maybe I fixated on this issue because it felt like something I could change.